Death, I did the alternative assignment where I had to research over a historical event and just list out some preventions that they could have made to, prevent what happened for the historical event. So here we go. Black Death. As you can see. Okay. Right, so first off, the reign of the Black Death. So it was also known as the bubonic plague or great mortality. People just give it different names. I just call it the Black Death personally, but yeah. And so it was mainly in the Eastern Hemisphere, mainly Asia, Europe, and Africa. And I just noticed Australia's on there, but I mean, it is part of the Eastern, but we won't need that on there because Australia wasn't really affected. So, okay. And so it's from 1347 to 1351, which was during the Middle Ages. Many deaths, 25 to 75 million. I mean, I read on websites, people said 200 million, 25 to 200, but I'd say that's a lot. So I think it's about 25 to 75 or maybe 50. So there was no cure back then. And it's still around. As you can see, the World Health Organization reports 1,000 to 3,000 cases of plague worldwide every year. An average of 5 to 15 cases occur each year in the western United States. So we're not safe, but it should be. So what caused it? It was caused by bacteria. So people usually think, oh, it's the rats they caused it. But no, it was caused by a bacterium called Yersinia pestis. So here's a picture of that. And it was discovered by these two men. Their names were Alexandre Yersin and Shibasuburo Kitasato. Yes, I think I said that right. And so fleas. So the name, I think it's Sinosila Chopis. And so here's a picture of that. And so what would happen is the bacterium Yersinia pestis, it would infect the host, which is the flea, and then the flea would infect the rats. So that's people usually just get it mixed up. Oh, it was just the rats, but no, it was actually the fleas and the bacteria. And so what would happen is the bacteria would infect the flea, and so it would just multiply up inside the flea, and so it would block the flea from eating or getting blood. And so by the time it gets hungry or bites something else, which is the rat, it just spreads so much of the bacterium that the rat would just be like a carrier of the disease with this, it's just bad. And so the rats, it gets in contact to humans. And so how did it become prevalent? So it started, I read from one of the articles from my research. There was one about the Tatar and the Genoese people. And so imagine these four young ladies were warriors, like these guys on the other picture, sword bearing and shield bearing. And they were running towards the Genoese people and just slaughtering them. And so what would happen is the dead bodies then pile up, and so the Genoese would return to their cities. So the Tatar had access to these dead bodies, and so they would catapult them over the city walls into the town. And so it was just a disaster. And so that was like bait, I guess you could say bait for the Black Death to spread more heavily. So it just spread inside the city and people just catch it, and so they couldn't bear it. So they just leave on boat and spread it across Europe, which was the wrong choice to do. And so European cities and towns. So how to become prevalent with that? It was because the towns, they had buildings that were closely intact with each other. So because there's a whole lot of people living inside the city and they didn't want to stay outside, so they stayed inside the city walls. And so what would happen is that if it rained, the sun wouldn't dry out the muddy ground. Yeah, and then so it just stayed muddy and dirty. And so that led to unsanitary conditions. So, back then people just didn't really care where they put their fecal matter or feces, and so they just leave it on the ground or something, and it just get gross. And adding on with the muddy conditions, it it was like a free home for the Black Death bacteria. So rodents, pests and rodents, that would attract them too. And then so once everything was sanitary, the water would become contaminated. So, once the water becomes contaminated, that's the only water you have, because back then the whole water system ran into one big hole, water hole, and so everything would get infected, and there's nothing people could do. So livestock, you guys wouldn't believe me, but people kept their animals inside with them in their homes, or just right outside the house, because they'd have nowhere else to put it at, because since everyone's buildings were so intact, they had nowhere else to put it, so they just live inside their house or close by. And usually in the winter they'd keep their animals inside the house with them, which made it even worse. So preventions, hygiene, cleanliness, that's great. First thing you should do, wash your hands, stay clean, take a shower, cleaning up after yourself. And then so scented aromas, candles, you may not believe me too, but they used to think that a fresh and good aroma would just keep the plague away, because since the Black Death was related to like unsanitary conditions, everything was dirty and stinky, and so they just have aromas and candles, because they think, oh, it keeps the death away, and so that's what they thought. And then latrine cleaners, that's basically another word for toilet cleaners. They think that toilet cleaners were immune to the disease because, oh, they were already filthy and dirty, so why would the plague infect them? There you go. And then the pest control, that's basically one other prevention, because the rats and rodents, they were carriers of the disease, obviously. And plague doctors, were they any help? No, because, all plague doctors, they were just there because of the bubonic plague. They were named right after because of the Black Death. So all they do is just diagnose them and say, oh, you have the Black Death. It was just sad. They were just basically. So was it easy? So I may have sounded like it was easy for them, but it of course was not, because of the time period. They didn't have technology, medical expertise, or equipment. They didn't know CPR, they didn't have antibiotics, because antibiotics kill bacteria, and so they didn't have nothing else to do except, religion. That's the word. Religion, yes. So, they just think, oh, it was a pestilence. It was damnation from God. And so they just pray to him, to help them. That's all. That's what they only knew. They didn't know what bacteria was. It was just sad, and they had nothing else to do except pray. What I learned from that in relation to today. So we're going through COVID-19, and so here's some quick things you should know. I'm pretty sure everyone knows this, but I'll just go through it quick. So just wash your hands, after things you do. That way, the contraction and the spread of the virus doesn't, get worse. Wear masks and gloves. That's very important too, because people don't know that they may have the virus, because the term asymptomatic means that you have the disease but you're not showing symptoms. So it's just very important to wear masks and gloves because you can still spread it. Practice social distancing, 6 feet, 10 feet. Cover coughs, that's important too because it's airborne now. And just cover it with your elbow, or just just cover your coughs. But if you can't start to do any of these, just stay indoors, because that's the best thing you do to minimize risk to yourself and other people. And last thing is to look out for each other. So that's what I'm trying to do now. And it's kind of related to the Black Death. It was uncalled for, and no one knew that it was coming. It was just like the Genoese people and us. We didn't expect China to have such a bad effect on the virus, and we didn't think it would spread over here. So we should take precautions, be safe, and take mandatory procedures, because it could be as worse as the Black Death. I'm not saying it will be, but I'm just saying it can be, because they didn't know what to do or how to prevent it, except just to pray. But we know what to do now, and we have obvious answers right here. Yeah. All right. Thank you guys. Thanks for listening.